Hello everyone, welcome to this tutorial. Today what I'm going to show you guys is how to not only download OpenRocket and I'm going to do a little bit of showing you guys how to use it, but I'm also going to explain why we use it. So let's get started. So the first thing is this document that I'm using right here. I'm going to put it in the description. It's really good as it gives us, a lot of basic information on how OpenRocket works. So the first thing I'm going to do is explain what OpenRocket actually is. So OpenRocket is a software that we use for rocketry. Now, perhaps the most important thing that it can do for us is it can help us not only design our rockets, but see how they're going to perform. So you can design your rockets, you can change motors, and you can also perform simulations. So why this might matter is, for example, if you have a rocket and you're split between two motors, OpenRocket might help you simulate those launches with the different motors, and you can see how they're going to perform, which is why this rocket or this software is so valuable. So for downloading the software, what you're going to want to do is go to openrocket.info, and once you go to this page, you're going to go to the download section right here, and there you have your downloads here. Now for Windows, you're going to click this. For Mac, you're going to click this. But aside from the downloads, this website does have a lot of useful information, but we'll do more on that later. So once your software is downloaded, it should appear on your desktop. Looks like this. You're going to open it up. So here's my software all booted up. It should look something like this. This is a newer version. If you get an older version, that's fine as well. So the first thing you're going to see is that it's split up between three main sections. So your bottom section right here is going to be where your rocket, once you design it, it's going to start appearing. You're going to see, it's going to look like a rocket down here. In your top left section, it says sustainer, and essentially this is going to have a tree of all of your components. And then in the top right, you have all the components you can add. So right now, nothing's showing up. If I click sustainer, you can see we can start off with a nose cone, a body tube, or a transition. And we also have a lot of other useful things. So what I'm going to show you guys is what this software looks when I actually have a rocket. Looks like when I actually have a rocket in it. So here's my level 1 rocket. And now you can see that a lot more things are appearing. So over here is my tree of components. Now it all starts off with a sustainer, which really doesn't mean anything. That just means like your rocket. So I have it all starting off with a nose cone, and then I worked my way down when I designed it. You can work your way from the bottom. I prefer down, doesn't really matter. And here, again, it's all the list. So if you click on this, now you can see you can start adding things in between it. Now, if you click on these components here at the bottom, you can see that they become bolded. Or it also works the same if you click them at the top. So if you double click a component, you can start to edit it. So for the nose cone, it's going to have some different things. So for example, it's asking me what shape do I want? What's the parameter, which really means how is that, how is the shape? It's a weird thing. It's only for this shape. Don't really worry about that. But you also have your length, your diameter. But perhaps the most important thing, for most components, except for really fins and nose cones, and then also like parachutes, but for body tubes, transitions, all that the software cares about is really just your mass and your size. So those are really the two most important things that you're going to want to do. So when you're first designing your rocket, you're probably going to be using it off the parts library. So if you click right here in the top right, you have a parts library. This is going to give you pretty much every single rocket component that is built that you can buy online. However, it's probably better to start with this, get an idea, but then look online to see what's actually available, because I guarantee you all this stuff is not actually for sale. It was at one point, but it might not be for sale anymore. So the reason you're going to want to use that parts library is it's going to give you some components that you can actually buy online. Now, again, the parts library is going to give you some dimensions. It's also going to give you a mass. But the important thing with the mass is a very crucial part of building a rocket. So once you get your components, what you're going to want to do is go to this override section and override the mass. And what that means is get your tube or whatever you bought, put it on a scale and actually measure it out and put that mass in OpenRocket. Disregard whatever mass it said it was using before, because that's not what you're actually flying in your rocket. Typically the what's it called? The length and the diameters, those are going to be accurate, so don't worry about that. You might want to check it again, but it should be accurate. So that's just important to note. So yeah, here we can see that we have all of our components for the rocket. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail with how all this stuff works, but let's go to the next tab. So again, here we have our rocket, but next we're going to go into motors and configuration. So once you have a pretty good looking rocket like this, this looks like a rocket that will fly. What you're going to want to do is go to this tab, and you can see that I already have some configurations in here, but we're going to want to go to new configuration because you're not going to have anything here. So click new configuration, and what you're going to want to do is put a motor in here. So this rocket is my level 1 certification rocket. So we know it's going to have to be H through J motor class. However, for a rocket that you might be building, really you should just look up other rockets about the same size, see what motors they're using, and you can go from there. So similarly to the parts library, it's very important to note that once I've narrowed this down to H and J. Once you've narrowed it down, you're going to see a huge list of motors. However, most of these motors you cannot actually buy. So that's where I would also say that go in here, so look at a motor, and then look it up online and see if you can actually buy it. Because I would say that probably 90% of these motors are not for sale. So what I would do if you can't find them online is start with Cicerone. Look up Cicerone online, see what motors they're selling, and then you might just have to adjust your rocket based on what they're actually selling. So Cicerone and Aerotech are the two places that I would start with that. Now, in addition to all this information, once you've clicked a motor, it's going to give you a thrust curve, and it's going to give you a ton of information here, which is really useful when you're actually designing your rocket. And that's also what makes this software so useful, is you can get some pretty accurate thrust curves. So what I'm going to do is, I know for this rocket, I want to use an H130. I've already predetermined that. So I'm going to look up H130. You're going to see I'm going to get it right here. You can see the thrust curve right there. And it's going to ask you for an ejection charge delay. Now, before you've designed your rocket, you're going to want to click plugged and then simulate it. Once your simulation gives you a estimated or best delay time, then you're going to want to change it. So right now I have no idea. I'm going to hit plugged. I'm going to hit OK. And it's going to put my motor inside of here. Now, you can also see that this is attached to my lower body tube. So that's just important to note. If I had it set to my upper body tube, it's going to put the motor like inside of my rocket here. The software has no idea what it's doing. So, that's not going to be good. So make sure that your motor is actually where you want it to be positioned in the rocket. Now, if you're still unsure, if you click this view type, you can go to, typically side is what you're going to be using, but you can also go to 3D figure, and that's going to let you get a 3D look at your rocket. So this black section right here is actually my motor. You can also do 3D unfinished, where you can see more, and then even 3D finished, where it's going to show you what your rocket's really going to look like. So let's go back to side view and continue with the next tab. So the next tab, and probably the most important tab, is going to be your simulations tab. So here you can see I have some simulations already set up. Now this final one is just a default simulation for the new motor I use, which is the H130. Now again, for those who don't know, the P means that it's plugged, meaning it has no ejection charge. So I have that. It's going to tell me how fast my rocket's going to fly when it's deployed. So the velocity off the rod is exactly that. Apogee is how high it goes. Velocity at parachute deployment, nothing, because I don't have I have no way to deploy my parachute, and then a little bit more information down here. So what I'm going to want to do here is see how it says optimum delay, and it gives me 7.2 seconds. Now for rocketry, what you're always going to want to do is overestimate that. Because, for example, if your parachute deploys in the middle of an upward launch, there's going to be too much force acting on it, and it's going to tear. So you always want to do just a little bit more, which means that if I have an 8-second delay, which is what I'm going to have to use, that means that it's going to be falling for about 3/4 of a second before the parachute deploys, and that's fine. So I'm going to hit, not here, I'm going to go to Motors and Configuration, New Configuration, H130, and I'm going to hit 8. But you can also change this to 7. I'll do 7.5. Okay, so you can actually trim your ejections. Okay. And now we're going to go to flight simulations, and we're going to want to use this one right here. So you can click run simulations. It's going to run it. Some things might change. You can see that the aperture is changing. So this is just saying with a 7.5 second delay, H130, this is all of the stats for this rocket. So one of the only concerning things with this is that it's saying that I'm going to hit the ground at 80 feet a second, which is really way too fast. You want to keep this under, I believe, about 50 feet a second. So again, once you have that, you're going to hit plot export. And if you plot it, this is going to let you see what your rocket's really going to be looking like. So this is going to show you the flight of your rocket. So this is a altitude, acceleration, and velocity versus time graph. So down here is my time. So this is the position of the rocket, or just the altitude of the rocket, not position, the altitude. So the altitude's increasing up until burnout, and then it's going down with its parachute. This yellow is the vertical velocity, so it's how fast the rocket's going. So obviously it's going the fastest right here, which is 1.3 seconds. This red is the acceleration, so you have high acceleration at the start, and then it begins to decelerate. So that's really important. And this is useful to see just how it's behaving. Typically, you don't want too much acceleration on your rocket, so that might be important to be considering in here. So that's kind of the bulk of this. Now, if you were asking me what would I change, how can these simulations help me change my rocket? Well, I would first say you might want to change your parachute size, because that is a very high ground hit velocity to be having. Like your rocket might break if it hits the ground that fast, so you might want to change that. So essentially, it'd be just get a bigger parachute. And yeah, that is pretty much everything with this software. There's only one more thing I want to go over, and that is your properties. So wait, not that. Sorry. That is your, where's preferences? Oh, here we go. Preferences in your edit tab. And the most important thing is making sure that your units are consistent. So typically what I use is metric. I don't really use imperial. So I'm going to click metric. Now, if you're building this in a team or anything else like that, make sure that everyone's using the same units. NASA had a launch one time that two companies were using different units and the rocket blew up. So again, there's not that much on the line building rockets like this, but it's great practice for the future. So make sure you're doing that. And yeah, that's really all I have for this tutorial. If you guys have any questions, you guys can email us, put it in the comments, whatever you need to do, and we will be more than happy to answer your questions.